Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. A ship made from junk. Now the galaxy's worst nightmare. Jack Mason floated in the cold emptiness of space, his worn spacesuit keeping him alive as he cut through the twisted metal of an old fighter ship. The only sound was his own breathing and the occasional buzz of his plasma cutter. Far from any planet or moon, Jack was at home among the garbage of the galaxy. "Max, how much oxygen do I have left?" Jack asked, his voice rough from breathing the recycled air. 42 minutes, Jack," replied the calm, slight mechanical voice of Max, the AI that ran Jack's small collection ship. "I suggest you finish cutting that engine part and return. The Concordat patrol will pass through this sector soon." Jack grunted and worked faster. The Galactic Concordat, the fancy name for the alliance of rich alien species that ran everything, didn't like humans poking around in space junk. But junk was all Jack had. "Got it," he said as the engine part broke free. It was old but valuable, from a military ship that had been destroyed in a battle 5 years ago. Jack pushed off from the wreck and floated back to his collection vessel, a small, ugly ship he called the Bucket. Inside the bucket, Jack pulled off his helmet and took a deep breath of the slightly stale air. He was a tall man with a shaggy beard and deep lines on his face, despite being only 35. Life as a space scavenger aged a person fast. "Max, what do you think this piece will get us?" Jack asked, turning the engine part in his hands. A small blue light flickered on the ship's main console as Max processed the question. Max wasn't housed in a fancy robot body or hologram projector like rich people's AAs. He was just a blue light and a voice, saved from a military disposal site 3 years ago. "Based on current market prices, approximately 4,000 credits," Max replied. "However, I must inform you that the Concordat announced new salvage taxes this morning. They have increased by 30%. Jack cursed and slammed his fist against the wall. 30%? That's robbery. They're trying to put guys like me out of business." "That appears to be the intent," Max said. "The official statement claims it is to encourage proper waste management and discourage unauthorized salvage operations." Jack ran his hands through his greasy hair. The bucket needed repairs, he needed food. And now the taxes would take most of his profits. The big companies could afford the taxes, but independent scavengers like him would starve. "Set course for Outpost 42, Jack said finally. "We'll sell what we have and figure something out." The journey to Outpost 42 took 16 hours. Jack slept fitfully in his small bunk, dreaming of easier times before the war that had left humanity scattered and poor. When he woke, the outpost was visible through the front viewport, a collection of modules and old ships welded together to form a trading hub on the edge of civilized space. After docking, Jack took his salvage to Moiko, the outpost's main buyer. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who ran the biggest salvage shop on the station. "Jack Mason," she said when he entered. "Still flying that death trap?" "The bucket gets me where I need to go," Jack replied, putting his salvage on her counter. "What can you give me for these?" Moiko examined each piece carefully, occasionally checking prices on her computer. When she finished, she looked up with a frown. "I can give you 5,200 credits for everything. After the new taxes, you'll take home 3,640. Jack's stomach sank. It wasn't enough. "Come on, Moiko, these parts are good. The engine piece alone is worth 4,000. "Was worth 4,000, she corrected. "The market's flooded right now. Everyone's trying to sell before the taxes go higher," she shrugged. "Take it or leave it." Jack took the money. He had no choice. Later, sitting in a corner of the outpost's dingy bar, Jack nursed a cheap drink and tried to think. With the credits he had, he could barely afford the repairs the bucket needed, let alone stock up on food and supplies. "You look like a man with problems," said a rough voice. Jack looked up to see Gus, an old scavenger with one eye and more stories than anyone believed. Gus sat down without being invited. "Just the usual," Jack said. "Not enough money, too many taxes." Gus nodded sagely. "The big boys are squeezing us out. Soon there will be no place for independent operators." He leaned forward. "Unless you find something big, something they want bad enough to pay real money for." "Like what?" Jack asked, though he knew Gus was probably just telling tall tales again. Gus grinned. "Word is, there's a military graveyard in the Krell Expanse. Ships from the big battle at Sector 7, untouched." Jack frowned. "The Krell Expanse is restricted deep space. Concordat patrols everywhere." "Exactly why nobody salvaged it." Gus tapped his nose. "High risk, high reward. After Gus left, Jack returned to the bucket, his mind racing with possibilities. The Krell expanse was dangerous, but if there really were untouched wrecks there. Max, what do you know about the Krell expanse? Jack asked as he climbed aboard. The Krell expanse is a region approximately 2.7 light-years across, currently under concorded military quarantine, Max replied. It was the site of the Battle of Sector 7, which resulted in the destruction of approximately 142 ships of various classes. What's the patrol pattern like? According to old data, 6 patrol ships on rotating schedules. However, my information may be outdated. Jack paced the small cabin, thinking hard. Then he stopped and looked at the piles of spare parts he'd collected over years of scavenging. Parts he kept because they might be useful someday. Max, he said slowly, what if we didn't sell our next big find? What if we used it instead? Please clarify, Max said. The bucket is falling apart. Repairs cost more every time, but I've got parts. Good parts. What if we built our own ship? Something better, something the Concordate wouldn't recognize. There was a pause as Max processed this idea. Building an unregistered spacecraft violates 17 Concordate regulations, Max finally said. Additionally, constructing a functional vessel requires specialized knowledge and equipment. You are a military AI. You must have ship schematics in your memory, Jack argued, and I've been fixing ships my whole life. Another pause. I do retain certain shipbuilding protocols, Max admitted. However, success probability is low given available resources. Jack smiled for the first time that day. Low isn't 0, and we're just desperate enough to try. He looked around the cluttered ship. We'll need more parts. Big ones. That means the Krell expanse. The risk is considerable, Max warned. So is starving, Jack replied. He sat in the pilot's chair and began plotting a course. We leave in 6 hours. The bucket may not have much time left, but she'll get us there for one last big score. As Jack worked, a new energy filled him. For years, he had simply survived day to day, scraping by. Now he had a plan, dangerous and probably illegal, but a plan nonetheless. The Concordate wanted to crush people like him with their taxes and rules. They thought humans were just annoying little creatures to be controlled. He would show them how wrong they were. The Krell expanse stretched before Jack's small ship like a dark ocean filled with floating islands of metal. The remains of the great battle that had happened here 5 years ago still drifted silently in space. Hundreds of broken ships, from small fighters to massive cruisers, formed a graveyard of technology. Concordate patrol ship detected, Max warned. Estimated time until visual range. 8 minutes. Jack's hands moved quickly over the controls. Show me the biggest wreck within range. A moment later, a diagram appeared on the screen. It showed a huge battle cruiser, its middle section blown open, but its engine room and command deck still mostly intact. Perfect, Jack whispered. He guided the bucket toward the wreck, using smaller pieces of debris for cover. The patrol ship passed by without noticing them, its sensors likely confused by all the metal floating around. When they reached the battle cruiser, Jack put on his spacesuit and prepared to go outside. I'll try to find the main computer core and any intact drive components, he told Max. Keep an eye out for patrols. Jack pushed off from his ship and floated toward the dark opening the cruiser's hull. His helmet light cut through the darkness, revealing a scene frozen in time. The ship had decompressed instantly when it was hit, killing everyone aboard. Their bodies had been removed, but personal items still floated everywhere. Photos, books, toys. These were people once, Jack said quietly. Not just Concordate soldiers. The Battle of Sector 7 resulted in 23,487 confirmed casualties. Max replied in his ear. 40% were non-combatants. Jack moved deeper into the ship. In the engine room, he found what he was looking for, a mostly intact quantum drive system, far more advanced than anything he could normally get his hands on. It would take multiple trips to salvage everything useful, but this ship alone could provide most of what they needed. Over the next 3 days, Jack worked tirelessly, cutting out valuable components and transporting them back to the bucket. They had several close calls with patrols, but each time they managed to hide among the debris. On the 4th day, as Jack was removing a power relay, Mac's voice came urgently through his helmet. Jack, 2 patrol ships approaching from different directions. They appear to be conducting a coordinated sweep. Jack looked at the half-removed relay. I need 5 more minutes. You have 3 at most, Max replied. After that, escape probability drops below 20%. Working frantically, Jack cut through the last connection and pulled the relay free. He pushed off toward the bucket, the heavy component making his movement slow and awkward. 1 minute, Jack, Max warned. Patrol ships closing. Jack reached the bucket and tumbled inside with the relay. He sealed the airlock as Max was already powering up the engines. Go, 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 Jack shouted, not bothering to remove his suit. The bucket lurched forward, weaving through the debris field. Behind them, the patrol ships had noticed the movement and were in pursuit. They're hailing us, Max said. Ignore it, Jack replied, strapping himself into the pilot's seat and taking manual control. Warning shots fired, Max reported. Hull damage likely if hit. Jack pushed the bucket to its limits, using the debris field for cover. The old ship groaned and shuddered under the strain. We can't outrun them, Jack muttered. Then he spotted a massive debris cluster ahead, the crushed remains of several ships fused together in a collision. But maybe we can hide. He cut the main engines and used just the maneuvering thrusters to slide the bucket into a gap in the debris. Then he shut down all systems except life support and Max's core processor. Play dead, he whispered. Outside, the patrol ship circled the debris field, sweeping it with sensors. Minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, they moved on, continuing their patrol route. Jack let out a long breath. That was close. Indeed, Max agreed. However, we have acquired approximately 78% of the components needed for our project. Jack grinned despite his exhaustion. Let's get out of here while we can. They limped back to a small, abandoned mining asteroid Jack knew about in the outer reach, far from any official outposts or popular salvage areas. Here, they could work without being discovered. The asteroid had been hollowed out by miners long ago, creating a perfect hidden dock for their project. Jack spent weeks sorting through the salvage parts, organizing them by type and function. Max projected schematics onto the walls, constantly adjusting the design based on the parts they had. This doesn't make sense, Jack said one day, looking at two incompatible power coupling systems, one from a concordant cruiser, the other from a trading vessel. These should never connect to each other. Correct, Max said. They use different power modulation frequencies. Jack scratched his beard, thinking, what if we use that old frequency converter we found in that luxury yacht? The one rich people used to power their fancy alien tech. Max was silent for a moment, running calculations. Theoretically possible, but highly irregular. The resulting power signature would be unusual. Unusual is good, Jack said. It means they won't recognize it. Day by day, their new ship took shape. It was smaller than a standard cruiser, but larger than the bucket. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals and alloys with no clear design pattern. Inside, systems that were never meant to work together had been carefully connected with custom adapters and workarounds. The strangest part was the power core. Jack had combined 3 different reactor types: a standard fusion reactor, an alien crystal power matrix, and an experimental quantum fluctuation generator. According to all standard engineering principles, this combination should either not work at all or explode spectacularly. But when they tested it, something unexpected happened. Power level stable, Max reported, surprise evident in his artificial voice. However, the energy signature is unlike anything in my database. Jack looked at the readings. Is it safe? Unknown, Max admitted. But it appears to be functioning at 143% of predicted efficiency. Jack grinned. Let's see what else we can mix and match. As the weeks passed, they discovered more unexpected compatibilities between technologies never meant to work together. Defense systems from 5 different species created shield patterns that shifted randomly. Navigation systems linked to weapons targeting created predictive algorithms that seemed almost precognitive. When they finally installed the makeshift bridge, Jack stood in the center, looking around at his creation. It was ugly, asymmetrical, and violated probably every engineering principle taught in the Concordat, but it was his. We need a name, he said. Max's blue light pulsed on the console. Traditional naming conventions suggest something related to its origin or purpose. Jack ran his hand along the mismatched control panel. The patchwork, he said finally. Because that's what we did. We patched together a future from everyone else's garbage. The patchwork, Max repeated. Name accepted and registered in ship logs. Jack sat in the captain's chair, his eyes bright with anticipation. Let's see if this jumpkeep can fly. Little did he know that their strange creation would soon change the face of the galaxy. The patchwork drifted out of the asteroid hangar, its mismatched hull plates reflecting starlight in odd patterns. Jack sat in the captain's chair, his hands moving carefully over the controls. Everything felt different from the bucket, more responsive, but also less predictable. All systems functioning within acceptable parameters. Max reported, his presence now filled the ship with interface points in every section. Though I must note that acceptable is a generous term for some of these readings. Jack laughed. As long as we don't explode, I'm happy. He looked out at the stars through the viewport. Let's take her for a real test. Set course for the Vega trade route. The Vega trade route was busy enough that they could blend in with other traffic, but not so regulated that every ship was stopped and checked. It was perfect for testing how the patchwork performed around other vessels without drawing too much attention. As they approached the route, Jack noticed how smoothly the ship moved. The strange combination of drive systems created a unique propulsion signature that seemed to slip through space more efficiently than standard engines. Max, how's our power consumption? Jack asked. Unexpectedly low, Max replied. The reactor configuration is achieving synergies I cannot fully explain. We are using approximately 40% less fuel than predicted. Jack grinned. That's what happens when you don't follow the rulebook. They joined the trade route, keeping a respectful distance from other ships. For an hour, everything went perfectly. The patchwork handled beautifully, responding to Jack's commands with surprising grace for such an oddly constructed vessel. Then a sharp alarm cut through the comm. 3 ships approaching from Sector 4, Max announced. Configuration suggests pirate vessels. Jack tensed. Are they targeting us? Affirmative. They appear to be jamming standard communication frequencies. Pirates were common in this area, preying on smaller merchant vessels that couldn't afford proper escorts. Usually, they would demand cargo or payment in exchange for safe passage, but the patchwork carried no cargo, and Jack had no money to give. Evasive maneuvers, Jack said, taking manual control. The pirates were fast, their ships clearly modified for pursuit. They quickly formed a triangle around the patchwork, trying to force it to stop. They're hailing us on an open frequency, Max said. Jack, no.